The pillow smelled like death and decades. Lily Chen stood in the doorway of room 114, holding a black trash bag in one hand and a pair of latex gloves in the other. The room was silent now, too silent. The kind of silence that comes after a life ends, when the machines stop beeping, when the shallow breathing finally ceases, when the body is wheeled away, and all that remains is the shape of a person pressed into sheets that will never be warm again. Saul Berkowitz had died 3 hours ago, alone, as he had lived for the past 11 years at Riverside Care Home. No family had come, no friends. The funeral home had already collected the body. The state would handle the burial, another forgotten soul in a system designed to warehouse the elderly until they disappeared. Lily had been a nurse here for 6 years. She had seen this before, too many times, but something about Saul's death felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. She stepped into the room. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting pale shadows across the bare walls. There were no photographs, no cards, no flowers, just a small wooden dresser, a metal bed frame, and that pillow, that goddamn pillow. Lily had noticed it the first day Saul arrived. Yellow with age, the fabric worn so thin in places you could see the foam inside. It smelled like mildew and something else, something acrid and old, like paper left too long in a damp basement. The pillowcase had been white once, maybe 50 years ago. Now it was the color of old teeth. She had offered to replace it 100 times. Every time, Saul refused. "This stays with me," he would say, his accent thick, his voice quiet but firm. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, would clutch the pillow to his chest, like a child holding a teddy bear. "You don't touch this. Nobody touches this." At first, Lily thought it was dementia. Old people got attached to strange things. A blanket, a stuffed animal, a pillowcase their mother made. It was common, but Saul wasn't demented. His mind was sharp until the very end. He read books in 3 languages. He did crossword puzzles in pen. He remembered every nurse's name, every medication schedule, every small kindness. And he never, ever let anyone touch that pillow. Even when the staff changed his sheets, he would hold it in his lap, watching them with dark, unblinking eyes. Even when they flipped his mattress, he kept it pressed against his chest. At night, the other nurses said, he slept with it under his head, one arm wrapped around it, like he was afraid someone would steal it in the dark. Lily pulled on the latex gloves and approached the bed. The pillow sat there, alone in the center of the mattress. Saul's last possession, the only thing he had cared about in this world. She reached for it. Her fingers hesitated an inch from the fabric. "You don't touch this. Nobody touches this." His voice echoed in her memory, not angry, not desperate, just certain, like he was protecting something more valuable than gold. Lily shook her head. She was being ridiculous. It was a pillow, a disgusting, unsanitary pillow that should have been thrown away years ago. Saul was gone. Whatever strange attachment he had to this thing died with him. She grabbed it. The fabric was rough under her gloves, stiff with years of sweat and oil. She lifted it, intending to stuff it directly into the trash bag, when something stopped her. Wait, the pillow was heavy. Not pillow heavy, not foam and fabric heavy. Wrong heavy. Lily frowned. She squeezed the pillow gently, expecting to feel the soft give of old foam. Instead, her fingers met resistance. Something solid, something that crinkled. Her heart skipped. She set the pillow down on the bed and pressed her palm flat against it, feeling the surface. There, beneath the foam, buried in the center, something hard, flat, layered. What the hell? Lily glanced at the open door. The hallway was empty. The morning shift was busy with breakfast trays and medication rounds. No one was paying attention to room 114. No one cared about the dead man's belongings. She turned the pillow over in her hands, examining the seams. The stitching was old, hand-sewn in places, reinforced with thread that didn't match, like someone had opened it multiple times and sealed it back up. Her fingers found a seam along the edge that was looser than the others. She pulled. The thread gave way easily, unraveling like it had been waiting for this moment. Lily's breath caught. She peeled back the fabric, exposing the yellow foam inside. It was brittle, crumbling at the edges. But there, nestled in a hollow carved into the center of the foam, was a stack of paper. Not paper, pages. Thin, delicate, yellowed with age. The edges were rough, torn, like they had been ripped from a book. Lily pulled one free. The paper was so fragile, it felt like it might disintegrate in her hands. She held it up to the light. It was a page from a book. The text was small, dense, printed in a language she didn't recognize. Hebrew, maybe. The page was covered in tiny handwritten notes in the margins, names, dates, numbers. The ink was faded, almost invisible in places. She squinted. Miriam Levin, born March 14, 1939. David Stein, born July 2nd, 1940. Rachel Goldberg, born November 18, 1938. Lily's hands began to tremble. She pulled another page from the pillow. More names, more dates, dozens of them, written in cramped, meticulous handwriting along the edges of the text. Esther Klein, born January 5th, 1941. Jacob Rosen, born September 27th, 1939. Hannah Weiss, born April 30th, 1940. Her pulse quickened. She tore open the rest of the seam, pulling the fabric apart. The foam crumbled in her hands, releasing a cascade of pages. They spilled onto the bed, onto the floor, a flood of fragile ancient paper. 50 pages, 100, more, every single one covered in names. Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. She picked up another page, then another, her eyes scanning the margins. Benjamin Adler, born December 12, 1937. Sarah Friedman, born August 8, 1939. Isaac Baum, born February 3rd, 1940. Children. These were children. And the dates, all of them between 1937 and 1942. Lily's throat tightened. She knew those years. Everyone knew those years. Her gaze fell on the printed text at the center of one page. She couldn't read Hebrew, but she recognized the format, the structure, the verse numbers. These weren't just any pages. They were pages from a Bible, a Torah, torn out, defaced, turned into a ledger. Why? Lily's mind raced. Saul had been old, 93 when he died. That meant he was born in 1932. He would have been a child during World War II, a teenager, and he was Jewish. She had seen the faded numbers tattooed on his forearm once, years ago, when she helped him change his shirt. He had pulled his sleeve down quickly, but not before she saw them. She never asked. You didn't ask about things like that. But now, holding these pages in her hands, the pieces began to fall into place. These are records. These are names of children. Children who needed to be hidden. Lily's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the page. She set it down carefully on the bed and stood, backing away from the pile of paper like it was something sacred, something dangerous. She pulled off her gloves and pressed her palms to her face, trying to steady her breathing. Saul Berkowitz had carried this pillow for decades. He had refused to let anyone touch it. He had slept on it every night, guarding it with his life, because it wasn't just a pillow. It was an archive, a record of lives that might have been erased from history. And he had been the keeper. Lily's eyes burned. She blinked hard, forcing back tears. She had thrown away his belongings a dozen times before. Old men died here every month. Their rooms were cleared. Their things were donated or discarded. No one cared about the worn-out clothes, the broken radios, the half-finished crossword puzzles. But this, if she had thrown the pillow away without checking, if she had tossed it into the incinerator like she was supposed to, these names would have been lost forever. Lily turned and looked at the pile of pages scattered across the bed. Hundreds of names, hundreds of children, and Saul had been the only one who knew. Lily didn't know what to do. She stood in the center of room 114 for what felt like an hour, staring at the pages, her mind spinning. She couldn't just leave them here. She couldn't throw them away. But she also couldn't walk out of this room with an armful of 70-year-old documents and no explanation. Think, Lily, think. She grabbed the trash bag and carefully began gathering the pages, placing them inside as gently as she could. Her hands were still shaking. She counted as she went. 50 pages, 70, 100. By the time she finished, there were over 200 pages in the bag. 200 pages torn from a Torah. 200 pages covered in the names of children who had lived through the darkest chapter of human history. Lily tied the bag closed and clutched it to her chest. She glanced at the door, then back at the bed. The pillow lay empty now, deflated and hollow. She picked it up and stuffed it into a second trash bag. Evidence. She didn't know why, but it felt important to keep it. She walked to the door and paused, looking back at the room one last time. Saul Berkowitz had died alone in this place. No family, no visitors, no one to say goodbye. But he hadn't been nobody. He had been someone who mattered, someone who had saved lives, and no one had known. Lily's jaw tightened. They're going to know now. She turned and walked out of the room, the trash bag clutched tightly in her arms. The administrative office of Riverside Care Home was a cramped, fluorescent-lit box at the end of the main hallway. The director, Margaret Calloway, sat behind a desk buried under stacks of paperwork, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up when Lily knocked. "Lily, what is it?" Lily stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She set the trash bag on the desk. Margaret frowned. "What's this?" "I need you to look at something." Lily opened the bag and carefully pulled out one of the pages. She placed it on the desk in front of Margaret. Margaret leaned forward, squinting at the faded text. "What am I looking at?" "Pages from a Torah," Lily said quietly. "I found them inside Saul Berkowitz's pillow." Margaret's frown deepened. Inside his pillow? He had them hidden, sewn into the foam. There are over 200 pages. All of them have names written in the margins. Names of children, dates of birth, all from the late 1930s and early 1940s. Margaret picked up the page, holding it delicately between her fingers. Her eyes scanned the handwritten notes. Her expression shifted from confusion to something else, something heavier. "My God," she whispered. "I think they're records," Lily said. "I think Saul was documenting children, Jewish children, during the war." Margaret set the page down and looked up at Lily. Her face had gone pale. "Do you know what this means?" "I think so. These could be the only records of these children. If their families were killed, if the official documents were destroyed." Margaret's voice trailed off. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "We need to contact someone, a historian, a museum, someone who can verify this." "Who?" Lily asked. Margaret turned back to her. "The Holocaust Museum, the Jewish Historical Society. I don't know, but we can't just sit on this. If these names are real, if these children survived, their families deserve to know." Lily nodded. "What do we do with the pages?" "We preserve them. We don't touch them more than we have to. And we find out who Saul Berkowitz really was." Margaret made the calls. Within 2 hours, a representative from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. was on the phone. Within 4 hours, a team of archivists was on a plane to Oregon. By the next morning, Room 114 had been transformed into a makeshift research station. Dr. Miriam Feldman, a senior archivist specializing in Holocaust documentation, stood at the center of the room, wearing white gloves and holding one of the pages up to a portable UV light. Lily watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her heart pounding. Dr. Feldman's eyes widened. "There's more," she said softly. "More?" Margaret asked. Dr. Feldman turned the page slowly under the light. "The ink he used, it's not regular ink. It's invisible under normal light, but under UV." She held the page higher. Lily stepped closer. Under the UV light, the margins of the page glowed. Not just names and dates, entire sentences, locations, routes, instructions, transport via Rotterdam. Contact Father Andreas, safe house at 42 Kerkstraat. Dr. Feldman's hands trembled. This isn't just a list of names. This is a smuggling network. He was documenting every step of the operation. "Operation?" Lily asked. Dr. Feldman looked up, her eyes bright with tears. He was saving them. He was smuggling Jewish children out of occupied territories, and he recorded every single one. The room fell silent. Dr. Feldman set the page down carefully and turned to Lily. "How many pages are there?" "Over 200. And they were all hidden in his pillow." Lily nodded. Dr. Feldman exhaled slowly. "Do you have any idea what you found?" Lily shook her head. "These children," Dr. Feldman said, her voice thick with emotion, "most of them probably don't know who saved them. Their families were killed. The records were destroyed. The people who helped them are dead. But this," she gestured to the pages spread across the bed, "this is proof. This is history. This is memory." Lily's throat tightened. "How many children?" Dr. Feldman picked up another page, scanning the names. "I'll need to count them all, but based on what I'm seeing, at least 500. 500! Lily's knees went weak. She leaned against the doorframe, her mind reeling. 500 children, 500 lives, and Saul had carried their names in a pillow for 70 years. The research took 3 weeks. Dr. Feldman and her team worked around the clock, photographing every page, transcribing every name, cross-referencing records from archives in Europe and Israel. They used UV lights, infrared imaging, and digital enhancement to reveal every hidden word, every faded note. Lily visited the room every day after her shift. She couldn't stay away. She needed to see it, to witness it, to understand. Dr. Feldman explained as she worked. Saul Berkowitz had been 15 years old when the war began. His family lived in Amsterdam. When the Nazis occupied the Netherlands, his father, a rabbi, had joined an underground network smuggling Jewish children to safety. Saul became a courier. He was small, unassuming, fluent in Dutch and German. He could move through the city without attracting attention. His job was simple: pick up children from hiding places, transport them to safe houses, and deliver them to the next link in the chain. Most of the children were under 10 years old. Many didn't speak. They had been taught to stay silent, to trust no one, to disappear. Saul carried them in carts, in baskets, hidden under blankets and vegetables. He walked them through checkpoints, past soldiers, into the countryside. He never knew their full names. He never knew where they ended up. But he wrote down what he could. Every child he carried he recorded. A first name, a birth date, a scrap of information. He tore pages from his father's Torah, one of the few possessions the family had left, and used them as his ledger. He wrote in the margins, in code, in invisible ink made from lemon juice and ash. When the network was discovered, Saul's father was arrested. His mother and sister were deported. Saul escaped. He fled to Switzerland, then to England, then to the United States. He carried the pages with him. He sewed them into the lining of his coat. Later, into a pillow. He never spoke about it, not to his wife, who died in 1998, not to his daughter, who died in 2003, not to the nurses at Riverside. He kept the secret until the day he died. Dr. Feldman looked up from her work, her eyes red. He was protecting them. Even after all these years, he was still protecting them. Lily wiped her eyes. Did any of them survive? Dr. Feldman smiled. We're about to find out. If you believe every life holds a story worth remembering, subscribe to this channel and join our community. The first match came 3 days later. A woman named Miriam Levin, now Miriam Roth, living in Tel Aviv, born March 14th, 1939. She had been smuggled out of Amsterdam as a toddler. She had no memory of it, no record of who saved her. Her adoptive parents had told her only that a young man had delivered her to their door in the middle of the night. Dr. Feldman called her. Miriam wept. I never knew his name, she said through the phone, her voice breaking. I never knew who he was. I've spent my whole life wondering. The second match came the next day, then the third, then the 10th. David Stein in New York, Rachel Goldberg in London, Esther Klein in Buenos Aires, Jakob Rosen in Toronto. One by one, the names on the pages were matched to living people, children who had become adults, adults who had become grandparents, families who had spent 70 years not knowing who had saved them. By the end of the month, Dr. Feldman's team had identified over 300 survivors or their descendants. 300 lives that could be traced back to a 15-year-old boy in Amsterdam, a boy who had carried their names in a pillow for the rest of his life. Lily stood in the hallway outside room 101, staring at the closed door. The room had been cleared now. The pages had been carefully packed and transported to the Holocaust Museum for preservation. The pillow, Saul's pillow, had been placed in a climate-controlled vault, labeled as a historical artifact. Margaret approached, holding a folder. You should see this. Lily took the folder and opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, addressed to Riverside Care Home. Dear staff, my name is Miriam Roth. I am 86 years old. I live in Tel Aviv. I recently learned that a man named Saul Berkowitz saved my life when I was 2 years old. He carried me out of Amsterdam and delivered me to a family who raised me as their own. I never knew his name. I never had the chance to thank him. I am writing to ask if there is any way I can honor his memory. I owe him everything. With deepest gratitude, Miriam Roth Lily's hands shook. She closed the folder and looked at Margaret. There are hundreds of letters like this, aren't there? Margaret nodded. Hundreds! Lily's eyes burned. She looked back at the closed door of room 114. Saul Berkowitz had died alone in that room. No family, no visitors, no flowers. But he hadn't been forgotten. Not anymore. The ceremony was held 6 months later at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. The Hall of Remembrance was filled with people, survivors, descendants, historians, journalists, diplomats, and Lily. She sat in the front row, wearing a simple black dress, her hands folded in her lap. She had never been to Washington before. She had never been to a ceremony like this. But Dr. Feldman had insisted. You're the one who found them, she had said. You're the reason this is happening. On the stage, a large display case held Saul's pillow, preserved behind glass. Beside it, a screen showed photographs of the pages, the names, the children. Dr. Feldman stood at the podium. Today, she began, her voice steady, we honor the memory of Saul Berkowitz, a man who spent his life in silence, a man who carried the weight of 500 lives in a pillow, a man who never asked for recognition, never sought glory, never told his story. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. But his story is not silent anymore. The screen behind her changed. Faces appeared, old faces, young faces, smiling faces. These are the children Saul saved, and these are their children, and their children's children, over 1,500 descendants, 1,500 lives that exist because one 15-year-old boy refused to let them be forgotten. The room was silent. Dr. Feldman stepped back from the podium. We have invited several of the survivors to speak today. The first is Miriam Roth. An elderly woman stood from the front row. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane, her silver hair pulled back in a bun. She climbed the steps to the stage and stood at the podium, her hands gripping the edges. She looked out at the audience, her eyes bright with tears. "I am here," she said softly, "because of Saul Berkowitz. I am alive because of him. My children are alive because of him. My grandchildren are alive because of him." Her voice broke. "I never knew his name. I never had the chance to say thank you, but I am saying it now." She looked at the display case, at the pillow behind the glass. "Thank you, Saul. Thank you for carrying me. Thank you for remembering me. Thank you for never letting go." She stepped back from the podium, tears streaming down her face. One by one, others stood. David Stein, Rachel Goldberg, Esther Klein, Jacob Rosen. Each one told their story. Each one said thank you. And Lily sat in the front row, tears running down her cheeks, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. After the ceremony, Lily stood alone in front of the display case, staring at the pillow. It looked so small behind the glass, so fragile, so ordinary. But it wasn't ordinary. It was a testament, a monument, a promise kept. Dr. Feldman approached, standing beside her. "You did something extraordinary, Lily." Lily shook her head. "I just found it. Saul did the extraordinary thing. You could have thrown it away. You almost did." Lily looked down at her hands. "I almost did." Dr. Feldman smiled. "But you didn't. And because of that, 500 names will never be forgotten." Lily looked back at the pillow, at the yellowed fabric, at the worn seams. "He carried them his whole life," she whispered. "He never let them go." "No," Dr. Feldman said softly. "He didn't." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Lily turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Behind her, the pillow remained, silent, sacred, eternal, a reminder that some things are worth carrying, some things are worth protecting, some things are worth remembering, even when the world forgets, even when no one is watching, even when you die alone in a room with no flowers. Because the weight of a life is not measured by who attends your funeral. It is measured by the lives you carry with you. And Saul Berkowitz had carried 500. Lily returned to Riverside Care Home 3 days after the ceremony. The flight back to Oregon had been long, but she hadn't slept. She kept seeing Miriam Roth's face at the podium, the way her voice had cracked when she said thank you, the way the other survivors had stood, one by one, their eyes wet with tears, their hands trembling as they spoke Saul's name. Saul Berkowitz, a name that had meant nothing to the world 6 months ago, a name that now echoed in the halls of the Holocaust Museum, a name that would be taught in classrooms, written in history books, carved into memory. But at Riverside, nothing had changed. The hallways still smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The residents still shuffled past in wheelchairs and walkers, their faces blank, their eyes distant. Lily clocked in for her shift and walked to the nurses' station. Her co-worker Janet looked up from a medication chart. "Hey, you're back. How was DC?" Lily set down her bag. "It was incredible." Janet smiled. "I saw the news coverage. They said over 1,000 people showed up. That's amazing." 1,500, Lily corrected quietly. 1,500 descendants. Janet's eyes widened. 1,500 from one man. Lily nodded. She opened her locker and pulled out her scrubs. He saved 500 children. Most of them had families, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. The ripple effect is, it's unimaginable. Janet shook her head slowly. And he lived here for 11 years. Right down the hall, and none of us knew. Lily paused, her hand on the locker door. No, none of us knew. She changed into her scrubs and started her rounds. Room 101, Mrs. Patterson, dementia. No visitors in 3 years. Room 103, Mr. Alvarez, stroke survivor. Daughter visits once a month. Room 107, Mrs. Kim, stage 4 cancer. Hospice care, days left, maybe hours. Lily moved through the rooms mechanically, checking vitals, administering medications, adjusting pillows. But her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Saul, about the 11 years he had spent in room 114, about the nurses who had changed his sheets, brought him his meals, helped him to the bathroom, about the conversations they'd had, the small talk, the weather, the TV shows. Had anyone ever asked him about his life? Had anyone ever wondered? Lily stopped in the hallway, her hand resting on the medication cart. She looked down the corridor toward room 114. The door was closed now. A new resident had moved in 2 weeks ago, an 87-year-old man with Parkinson's. No family listed on his intake form. Lily's chest tightened. How many more Sauls are there? How many people are living here, dying here with stories no one will ever hear? She finished her rounds in silence. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She kept seeing the pages from the Torah, the names written in the margins, the invisible ink glowing under UV light. Miriam Levin, David Stein, Rachel Goldberg, 500 names. 500 lives, and Saul had carried them alone. Lily rolled over and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She opened her browser and typed Saul Berkowitz Holocaust Rescuer. The search results filled the screen. Holocaust Museum, Honors Unsung, hero who saved 500 children. Nurse discovers hidden archive in elderly veteran's pillow. The man who carried 500 names for 70 years. Lily clicked on the first article. It was from the Washington Post. There was a photograph of the ceremony, the Hall of Remembrance, the display case with the pillow, Miriam Roth at the podium, and there, in the front row, was Lily. She stared at her own face in the photograph. She looked small, overwhelmed, out of place. But she had been there. She had been part of it. She scrolled down. The article detailed Saul's story. His childhood in Amsterdam, his work with the Underground Network, his escape to Switzerland, his immigration to the United States in 1951, and then a section Lily hadn't known about. After arriving in the United States, Berkowitz worked as a tailor in Brooklyn for 40 years. He married in 1954. His wife, Ruth, died in 1998. They had one daughter, Rebecca, who died in a car accident in 2003. Berkowitz had no surviving family. He moved to Riverside Care Home in Oregon in 2014, where he lived until his death in 2025. Lily's throat tightened. No surviving family. Saul had lost everyone. His parents, his sister, his wife, his daughter. And still, he had carried those names. Still, he had protected them. Lily set the phone down and closed her eyes. She thought about the pillow, about the way Saul had clutched it to his chest, the way he had refused to let anyone touch it. You don't touch this. Nobody touches this. He hadn't been protecting a pillow. He had been protecting the only family he had left. The next morning, Lily arrived at work early. She went straight to the records room and pulled the files for every resident currently living at Riverside. 43 people. 43 lives. She sat at the desk and started reading. Harold Jensen, age 91. Retired factory worker, no listed family, no emergency contact. Dolores Martinez, age 88. Former school teacher. One son, no contact in 6 years. Eugene Park, Age 85, Korean War veteran, no listed family, no emergency contact. Lily's hands trembled as she turned the pages. How many stories are buried in these files? How many lives are being forgotten? She closed the last file and sat back in her chair, staring at the stack of folders. 43 people, 43 residents. And how many of them would die alone, like Saul, with no one to remember them? Lily stood abruptly. She grabbed a notebook from the desk and walked out of the records room. She had an idea. Over the next 2 weeks, Lily started a project. She called it the Memory Project. The concept was simple. Interview every resident at Riverside who was willing to talk. Record their stories. Document their lives. Preserve their memories. She started with Harold Jensen in room 102. Harold was a quiet man. He rarely spoke. He spent most of his days sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the parking lot. Lily knocked on his door. "Mr. Jensen, do you have a few minutes?" Harold looked up, surprised. "For what?" "I'd like to talk to you. About your life, if that's okay." Harold frowned. "Why?" Lily smiled. "Because I think your story matters." Harold stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, sit down." Lily pulled up a chair and opened her notebook. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "Where were you born?" Harold's expression softened. "Minnesota, small town called Brainerd. My father was a logger. My mother worked at the general store. What was it like growing up there?" Harold's eyes grew distant. "Cold, real cold, but beautiful. We had a lake near our house. In the summer, my brothers and I would swim there every day. In the winter, it would freeze solid. We'd skate on it." Lily wrote quickly, capturing every word. "Do you have any brothers or sisters now?" Harold shook his head. "They're all gone. I'm the last one." "What did you do for work?" "I worked at a factory, made parts for airplanes. Did that for 42 years. Did you ever get married?" Harold's face tightened. "Once. Her name was Dorothy. She died in 1989, cancer." "I'm sorry." Harold looked down at his hands. "Me too." They talked for an hour. Harold told her about his childhood, his time in the Navy, his marriage, his work. He told her about the house he built with his own hands, the garden he kept, the dog he loved. By the end, Harold's eyes were wet. "No one's asked me about this stuff in years," he said quietly. Lily reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Harold nodded. "Thank you for listening." Lily interviewed 12 residents over the next 2 weeks. Dolores Martinez, the school teacher who had taught 3rd grade for 38 years and still remembered the names of her first class. Eugene Park, the Korean War veteran who had been a medic and saved 6 men under fire. Margaret O'Brien, the nurse who had worked in a tuberculosis ward in the 1950s and held the hands of dying children. Each story was different. Each life was unique. But they all had one thing in common. They had been forgotten. Lily compiled the interviews into a binder. She typed them up, printed them, and added photographs from the residents' personal belongings. She titled it The Memory Project. Stories from Riverside Care Home. She showed it to Margaret Calloway, the director. Margaret read through the pages slowly, her expression shifting from curiosity to something deeper. When she finished, she looked up at Lily, her eyes red. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "I want to keep doing it," Lily said. "I want to interview everyone. I want to make sure their stories don't disappear." Margaret nodded. "Do it. I'll support you however I can." Word spread quickly. Within a month, families started reaching out. Children and grandchildren of residents who had read about the Memory Project in the local newspaper. They wanted copies of the interviews. They wanted to know more about their parents, their grandparents, the lives they had lived before Riverside. Lily started receiving letters. Dear Lily, thank you for interviewing my father, Harold Jensen. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years. I didn't know he built a house with his own hands. I didn't know he had a dog named Charlie. Reading his story made me realize how much I've missed. I'm visiting him next week. Sincerely, Tom Jensen. Lily read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. She pinned it to the bulletin board in the nurse's station. More letters came. Thank you for giving my mother a voice. Thank you for remembering my father. Thank you for caring. Lily kept everyone. 6 months after the ceremony in Washington, Lily received a call from Dr. Feldman. Lily, I have news. Lily sat down at her desk. What is it? We've been contacted by a filmmaker. She wants to make a documentary about Saul, about the pillow, about you. Lily's heart skipped. A documentary? Yes. It would tell the whole story. Saul's life, the smuggling network, the discovery, the ceremony, and the memory project. She thinks your work at Riverside is part of Saul's legacy. Lily's throat tightened. I don't know. I'm just a nurse. You're not just a nurse, Dr. Feldman said firmly. You're the person who made sure Saul's story didn't die with him. You're the person who's making sure no one else's story dies either. That matters, Lily. That matters more than you know. Lily closed her eyes. Okay, I'll do it. The documentary took a year to film. The director, a woman named Sarah Klein, followed Lily through her daily routines at Riverside. She filmed interviews with the residents. She traveled to Washington to film the pillow in the museum. She interviewed survivors and their families. And she uncovered something Lily hadn't known. Saul had kept a journal. It had been found in his belongings after his death, tucked into the bottom of his dresser drawer. It was small, leather-bound, filled with cramped handwriting in Yiddish. Dr. Feldman had it translated. Sarah showed Lily the transcript. Lily read it slowly, her hands shaking. January 12, 1943. I carried a girl today. She was 3 years old. She didn't speak, she didn't cry. She just held my hand and walked. I don't know her name. I don't know where she's going. But I wrote down her birth date, March 14th, 1939. I will remember her. February 3rd, 1943. Another boy today. He was 5. He asked me if his mother was coming. I didn't know what to say. I told him she would find him. I don't know if that's true. I wrote down his name. David, born July 2nd, 1940. I will remember him. April 18th, 1943. My father was arrested today. They took him in the night. My mother and sister are in hiding. I don't know if I will see them again. But I have the pages. I have the names. I will carry them. I will not let them be forgotten. Lily's vision blurred. She set the transcript down and pressed her hands to her face. Saul had been 15 years old. 15. And he had carried that weight for 70 years. If this story touched your heart, click like and subscribe to honor those who served. The documentary premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. Lily sat in the theater, surrounded by strangers, watching her own face on the screen. The film opened with footage of Riverside Care Home, the long hallways, the quiet rooms, the residents sitting alone. Then Lily's voice. I almost threw it away. I almost threw the pillow into the trash. If I had, 500 names would have been lost forever. The screen shifted to the pages. The names. The invisible ink glowing under UV light. Then Miriam Roth at the podium. I am alive because of Saul Berkowitz. Then Harold Jensen in his room at Riverside. No one's asked me about this stuff in years. The film wove the stories together. Saul's story, Lily's story, the residents' stories. By the end, the entire theater was silent. When the credits rolled, the audience stood and applauded. Lily sat frozen in her seat, tears streaming down her face. Sarah leaned over and squeezed her hand. "You did it, Lily. You made sure they're remembered." The documentary won awards. It was screened at festivals around the world. It was picked up by a streaming service and watched by millions. And the Memory Project expanded. Care homes across the country started their own versions. Nurses and social workers began interviewing residents, recording their stories, preserving their memories. Lily received emails from people she'd never met. "Thank you for inspiring this. My grandmother's story is being recorded because of you. Thank you for reminding us that every life matters. Thank you for not throwing away the pillow." Lily kept every email. 2 years after Saul's death, Lily stood in the Hall of Remembrance at the Holocaust Museum. She was there for the dedication of a new exhibit, The Pillow, Saul Berkowitz and the 500 Names. The exhibit featured the pillow behind glass, the pages displayed on screens, and a timeline of Saul's life. But it also included something new, a wall of photographs, 1,500 faces, the descendants of the children Saul had saved. Lily walked slowly along the wall, reading the names beneath each photograph. Miriam Roth, granddaughter of Miriam Levin. David Stein, son of David Stein. Rachel Goldberg, great-granddaughter of Rachel Goldberg. She stopped in front of a photograph of a young girl, maybe 6 years old. Dark curls, bright eyes, smiling. The caption read, "Emma Rosen, great-great-granddaughter of Jacob Rosen." Lily stared at the photograph. This child existed because Saul Berkowitz had carried a boy named Jacob out of Amsterdam 80 years ago. This child would grow up, have children of her own, and the ripple would continue forever. Lily's chest tightened. She pressed her hand to the glass. "Thank you, Saul. Thank you for carrying them. Thank you for never letting go." Lily returned to Riverside the next day. She walked through the familiar hallways, past the familiar rooms, to the nurses' station. Janet looked up. "Hey, how was the museum?" Lily smiled. It was perfect. She set down her bag and pulled out her notebook. "Who are we interviewing today?" Janet asked. Lily flipped through the pages. Room 118, Mrs. Delgado. She was a seamstress. Worked in the garment district in New York for 50 years. Janet grinned. "Let's go." They walked down the hallway together. Lily knocked on the door of room 118. A soft voice answered, "Come in." Lily opened the door and stepped inside. Mrs. Delgado sat in a chair by the window, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up, her eyes bright. "Hello," Lily said gently. "My name is Lily. I'm a nurse here. I'd like to talk to you about your life, if that's okay." Mrs. Delgado smiled. "I'd like that." Lily pulled up a chair and opened her notebook. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "Where were you born?" Mrs. Delgado's face softened. "Puerto Rico, a little town in the mountains. My father was a farmer. My mother made the most beautiful dresses." Lily wrote quickly, capturing every word. And as Mrs. Delgado spoke, Lily thought about Saul, about the pillow, about the 500 names, about the 1,500 descendants, about the ripple that never ends. She thought about Harold Jensen and Dolores Martinez and Eugene Park and all the others whose stories she had recorded, and she realized something. Memory is not passive. Memory is an act of love, an act of defiance, an act of faith that says, "You mattered, you matter, you will always matter." Saul Berkowitz had spent 70 years carrying 500 names in a pillow, and Lily would spend the rest of her life making sure no one else's name was forgotten. Because that's what we owe each other. That's what we owe the dead. That's what we owe the living. To remember, to carry, to never let go. The pillow remains in the Hall of Remembrance, behind glass, preserved, sacred, a monument to one man's quiet heroism, a testament to the power of memory, A reminder that the smallest acts can echo through generations. And every day, people stand in front of it. They read the names, they see the photographs, they learn the story, and they remember. They remember Saul Berkowitz, the 15-year-old boy who carried children through the darkness. They remember the 500 names written in the margins of a Torah. They remember the 1,500 descendants who exist because one person refused to forget. And they remember Lily Chen, the nurse who almost threw it all away, but didn't, because she felt something inside, something hard, something sacred, something worth saving. If you believe every life holds a story worth remembering, subscribe to this channel and join our community. In the end, we are all just names in the margins, fragile, fading, forgotten, unless someone chooses to remember, unless someone chooses to carry us, unless someone refuses to let go. Saul Berkowitz carried 500 names for 70 years, and because of that, those names will never die. They will live in the children who were saved, in the families who were reunited, in the stories that are told, in the memories that are kept, in the pillow behind the glass, forever. 3 years after the documentary premiered, Lily received a letter. It was postmarked from Tel Aviv. She opened it carefully. "Dear Lily, my name is Emma Rosen. I am 8 years old. My great-great-grandfather was Jacob Rosen. He was saved by Saul Berkowitz when he was 5 years old. My teacher showed us the documentary about Saul and the pillow. She said you are the person who found it. I wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I know who saved my great-great-grandfather. Because of you, I know my family's story. When I grow up, I want to be a nurse like you. I want to help people. I want to remember their stories. Thank you for not throwing away the pillow. Love." Emma Lily read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her notebook, right next to the photograph of Saul Berkowitz, the man who carried 500 names, the man who never let go, the man who changed the world with a pillow. And in room 118, Mrs. Delgado finished her story. Lily closed her notebook and smiled. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Mrs. Delgado reached out and took Lily's hand. "Thank you for listening." Lily squeezed her hand gently. "Your story matters," she said softly, "and I will make sure it's remembered." Mrs. Delgado's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Lily stood and walked to the door. She paused and looked back. Mrs. Delgado sat by the window, the afternoon light falling across her face. And Lily thought, she is not forgotten. None of them are forgotten. Not anymore. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door gently behind her. The work continued. The stories continued. The memory continued. Because some things are too important to lose. Some things are too precious to forget. Some things must be carried, even when it's hard, even when no one is watching, even when the world moves on. We carry them, we remember them, we honor them, because that is what it means to be human, to hold the weight of another life in your hands and refuse to let go. Saul Berkowitz died alone in room 114, but his story lives on, in the pillow behind the glass, in the 1,500 descendants, in the documentary watched by millions, in the memory project that spread across the world, in the little girl named Emma who wants to be a nurse, in every person who hears his name and remembers. He carried 500 names for 70 years, and now the world carries his forever.